Okay, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where we are completely unpacking the ultimate survival toolbox. Using a really fascinating set of biological blueprints from our source notes, we're going to explore exactly how animals are physically built and, functionally fueled to conquer the wild. We are literally looking at the architecture of life itself. It's going to be a fun one.
To get started, we really have to ask ourselves, what are the absolute fundamental building blocks of animal survival? I mean, if you strip away the fur, the feathers, and the scales, what are the core, non-negotiable requirements that allow an organism to not just exist, but to actually thrive in a pretty hostile world?
So here's our game plan for today. First, skeletons, inside and out. Second, sourcing nutritional fuel. Third, the mathematics of symbiosis. Fourth, ingestion and feeding methods. And finally, number 5, the evolution of digestion.
All right, part 1, skeletons inside and out. This is our physical foundation.
The blueprint of animal architecture really boils down to two main strategies. On one hand, you've got the exoskeleton. Think of this like an organism wearing a permanent suit of armor on the outside, right? It totally shields those soft tissues. Then, on the flip side, we have the endoskeleton. This is a lot more like the internal steel scaffolding of a skyscraper. It provides a rigid framework on the inside that everything else just kind of hangs off of.
And what's truly amazing here is the sheer diversity of materials nature uses to build these things. For exoskeletons, arthropods, like your crustaceans, they use this super tough substance called chitin. Meanwhile, the ancient ostracoderms actually wore their bones on the outside. Just imagine having your ribs on top of your skin. Crazy, right? We also see the tortoise using a dense shell or carapace. For internal endoskeletons, you've got things like sea sponges, the porifera, using these tiny structural elements called spicules made of calcium or silica along with spongin proteins. And obviously in higher animals, that scaffolding is made entirely of bone.
Now, what's really interesting about how these notes map things out is how neatly they branch these strategies. They cleanly divide exoskeletons and endoskeletons, linking each specific class of animal right to its structural material. It shows us that nature, well, it clearly doesn't have just one correct answer for survival. It's constantly adapting its building materials to fit the environment.
Okay, so we understand the physical armor and the scaffolding. But listen, a structure, no matter how tough it is, cannot operate without power. That brings us to our next crucial question. We know how they're built, but how do they eat?
Which leads us to section 2, sourcing nutritional fuel.
Looking at the source notes, they lay out 3 major nutritional strategies. First up are the autotrophs. Think of certain protozoans here. These guys are entirely self-sustaining. They literally make their own food. Then, completely on the other end of the spectrum, you have parasitic organisms. They steal their energy by feeding directly off a living host. And finally, saprophytic organisms. They act as nature's cleanup crew, fueling themselves by breaking down dead or decaying matter.
Moving on to section 3, the mathematics of symbiosis.
So securing energy isn't always a solo mission. And what is incredibly cool here is how brilliantly simple it is to track these survival relationships using just basic mathematical notation. We look at mutualism as a plus-plus situation. Both organisms benefit, it's a total win-win. Commensalism is +0. One wins, and the other, it simply doesn't care. Immensalism is plus-minus, where one thrives but it actually harms the other. And neutralism is 0-0. Two organisms exist in the exact same space but completely ignore each other. It's just such an elegant equation for understanding really complex biological behaviors.
To really see this in action, take a look at the chlorhydra, or the green hydra, and its relationship with chlorella. This is textbook mutualism right here. The chlorella algae live inside the hydra, providing it with food through photosynthesis. In return, the hydra provides a safe, protected home for the algae. It's the absolute perfect plus-plus equation.
But, knowing where the energy comes from is just one piece of the puzzle. We still have a physical hurdle to clear. Once an organism secures a food source, whether that's by hunting, scavenging, or partnering up, how exactly does it consume it?
That brings us to section 4, ingestion and feeding methods. The blueprints here define 2 massive dividing lines in how life sustains itself. The first is holophytic. This is your plant-like nutrition, creating food internally, usually through photosynthesis. The second is holozoic, which is animal-like nutrition. Holozoic requires actual physical ingestion. The organism literally has to take external matter and force it inside its own body to survive.
The diagrams from our notes perfectly illustrate the mechanics of this holozoic feeding. Take the filter feeder, for example. You can see how it creates a physical water current to draw microscopic food particles straight down into its body. Contrast that with organisms that just engulf their prey whole. The mechanics are completely, 100% tailored to the size and location of the fuel source.
Okay, so the food is now inside the organism. Great. But a chunk of food isn't the same thing as cellular energy. So our final question is this. Once an organism captures its food, how does it physically process it to extract the power?
Which brings us to our final section. Section 5, the evolution of digestion.
Historically, digestion began at a microscopic level with intracellular digestion. This just means the food particle is taken directly inside a single cell, where enzymes break it down. But as animals got larger and a whole lot more complex, they developed extracellular digestion. Here, food is broken down in a specialized cavity or tube outside of the individual cells. This was a real game changer because it allowed the animal to consume much larger prey and extract way more energy. As that extracellular digestion evolved, two main systems emerged. First, the incomplete digestive system. Think of this as basically a biological sac with only one opening. Food goes in and waste comes out. The exact same door. Yeah. The massive evolutionary upgrade to this was the complete digestive system, which features two distinct openings, a mouth for intake and an anus for waste.
You can actually track this evolution directly in the source diagrams. You start with a single amoeba-like cell for intracellular digestion. Moving up in complexity, you see the sac-like incomplete system. Notice that single opening at the top of the pouch. And finally, you get to the highly complex complete system. You can trace the path showing the long, specialized alimentary canal stretching all the way from one end of the organism to the other.
The reason that complete system is so revolutionary is its flow. It's essentially a highly efficient biological assembly line. You have intake via the mouth, then unidirectional processing where food moves in one direction through specialized chambers, and finally expulsion. Because the flow never stops or reverses, the animal can continuously eat and extract energy at the exact same time. It's a huge advantage.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, it becomes pretty clear that the architecture of survival in the animal kingdom relies entirely on this triad. It absolutely requires the physical structure of a skeleton, a reliable method for sourcing nutritional fuel, and an efficient internal digestive system to process that fuel. These three elements together, they are the ultimate survival tools.
When you look at the natural world now, you really won't just see animals anymore. You'll see complex, biological machines perfectly adapted to their environment. So, I want to leave you with this to ponder. As our environments rapidly change, how do you think these ancient structural and nutritional strategies will determine an animal's ultimate success or failure in the wild of tomorrow? Keep that in mind and keep exploring.